You're in the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
These are exciting times, ladies and gentlemen. In this first segment, Chris O'Brien's going to tell us about a new cattle mutilation case. A little bit later, we'll hear from Chris Rutkowski, the Canadian UFO researcher, about his survey of 25 years of reports. And of course, when you talk about UFOs, one of the issues that Robert Schaefer raised last week was the reliability of eyewitness testimony, because the skeptic will assume it's all conventional and the eyewitnesses are just plain wrong. Now, a couple of things to mention about that, and I won't dwell on it. Number one, I wrote to Kathleen Marden, who is Betty Hill's niece, and she'll probably be on the show in the next few weeks. But in any case, she remarked that in general, Schaefer misrepresents the facts about the Hill case to prove his point. That's one thing. The second thing, of course, is that we have this disagreement, apparently, between Micah Hanks and Robert Schaefer, because Hanks, in talking with Schaefer, got the impression he believed that a lot of the people who report UFOs are lying. When we posed that question to him last week, well, maybe some are. So we have two testimony versions here. And if Schaefer's right that you can't believe a person's testimony, well, why should we believe him? Why should we believe what he has to say or his version of facts if what people say is unreliable? I put that to you, Chris.
Well, boy, you got to go out and actually do field work to really get a sense of how people's memories can fade, how their recollections can differ from one person to the next in a group that had a singular event occur to them. You just can't sit back in your armchair and make sweeping pronouncements about very fundamental elements such as this. And I think it does someone with a half a brain on their shoulders a disservice to make sweeping pronouncements like that.
I think the big problem also about this is he tries to paint this all with a broad brush. He gives you casual, very simple versions of cases, some of which, as we pointed out with the Rendlesham case, are just plain wrong. And then he says, well, there's nothing to it. Now, I understand we should be skeptical because we have a problem in the UFO field where some people accept everything, which you can't do. And I think those who really look at the subject carefully are going to admit that over 90% of the reports of UFOs can be explained by conventional means. But what about the other 10%? The other thing is that UFO researchers, when they really dwell into an important case, they want the ones with multiple witnesses, so you can account for the variations and look for the consistencies.
Yeah, good point.
So anyway, it's not that we're not going to ever have Schaefer on the show again. He's a nice guy, and I'm sure he believes everything that he says, but that's where you go. Speaking of testimony, this cattle mutilation case that you and David Perkins are looking into, can you tell us more?
I can. These cases occurred about 13 miles northeast of Walsenburg, Colorado, which is between Trinidad, which is on the border with New Mexico, right on I-25 between Trinidad and Pueblo, Colorado. It's the next county east of the San Luis Valley counties of Costilla and Alamosa. And these animals were found, two of them were found, I believe, on August 8th, and then another 6 animals were discovered the following weekend. We have a veterinary report that's pending, that's coming out. There's eyewitness accounts, here we go again, of very unusual helicopter activity the night of these reports, and also unusual object sightings, as many as a dozen possibly in one particular account. Some of the helicopter activity is in my mind, very theatrical. In one case, the night of, I think, the second weekend of the 16th. Again, I'm not totally familiar with the exact details of what happened when. I'm still kind of getting myself up to speed. But we have a very interesting account of at least 4 military-style helicopters shining spotlights on the ground, and in one instance actually shining into a rancher's house, waking his wife up and and they both ran out to check it out. This is highly unusual, this case. There's elements from last March of lasers being pointed at airplanes from the ground, and coordinates by the FAA being forwarded to Huerfano County authorities, who were dispatched when this happened again the following week. Again, this is back in March. And it's maybe just a coincidence, but the animals that were found mutilated in one of these two groups were in the same pasture as the coordinates from someone painting civilian aircraft from the ground with a fairly high-powered laser. So there's some pretty interesting elements here, and the sheriff's department is taking all this very, very seriously. Ex-sheriff Lou Girotto, who of course was made famous in Linda Howe's movie A Strange Harvest, one of the few law enforcement officials that have come forward and said he thinks that these animals are being mutilated from aliens from outer space. Lou is now in his mid to late 80s. He's getting up there in years, but he's getting involved here. And we have obviously this article coming out in the Huerfano World Journal, which would have come out Thursday before the show here. And as with many cases of this type, when you have a large number of animals like this in a single case, there's a probability, I would say beyond a possibility, that other cases are occurring and not being reported. Once this hits the media, invariably these cases come out, people start talking. So, this is an ongoing investigation. I am kind of scooping David a little bit by a few hours here. We're taping on Wednesday before the show that airs on Sunday. So by the time the show airs, this is really going to, I think, go all over the net and probably go international. This is quite a number of animals to be reported in a single week from a single small area.
Now, in general, if someone has a situation like this, a rancher encounters some kind of episode of this nature, where do they go? Do they go to the local police? Is that the only place?
Yeah, generally the calls is filed with the local sheriff. We're talking about $14,000 worth of cattle here, so this isn't a lost investment. One of the ranchers is a very large rancher. There were only 400 some odd head in this particular herd, but he has animals all over the West. He has the wherewithal and the means to have veterinarian pathology reports conducted and pathology exams to be conducted. So we are waiting to hear some toxicology results. One of the things that is very unusual is 4 of the animals were gone over with a metal detector. There was some question of maybe they had been shot. And, these are classic mutes in the sense that there's no footprints or tire tracks or any sort of evidence at the site. But this is a very good idea, actually, to go over the animals carefully with a metal detector. And 4 of the animals showed some sort of metal in the hip. But there was no visible means there's no bullet holes or anything like that would indicate why that metal was there. The rancher thought perhaps they'd been darted and the darts had broken off and they just were unable to see them and locate them in the carcass. But, the vet will obviously tell us whether that's true or not.
We'll have more to report about over the coming weeks. You can also check out our forums at forum.theparacast.com. Quick reminder, if you join our newsletter, our weekly Paracast newsletter, by going to theparacast.com and signing up, we'll email you a copy free of the ebook version of Secrets of the Mysterious Valley by Chris. Hundreds of people are signing up, so a lot of attention is certainly being drawn to that book. In any case, today Chris Rutkowski is going to talk about a report in which he was involved called UFOs over Canada, 25 years of UFO reports. We'll talk about eyewitness testimony, the reliability, and the best cases. A lot more to come. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on our distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and the Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
So here's what happened. I was placing an order online. The site went down. It took hours before it returned, but I'd already placed the order with another company. If your site goes down, you could lose business. And if you have a business or personal site, you'll want to know it's easy to run and it will stay online. At iWeb, your site is hosted on one of the most reliable networks in the world. Talk to a sales rep at iWeb.com. Use the promo code TechNightOwl for a special discount.
Mike Stenerson for Midas Resources. At no time in history have precious metals been more important, certainly not in my 22 years in the industry. The dollar has lost over 90% of its value in the last 60 years. No fiat currency has ever survived the government printing presses. Ours is not immune. The time is now to be proactive. 1-800-686-2237, extension 116. Anything tied to the dollar is at risk. CDs, annuities, 401ks, IRAs, stocks, bonds, you name it, so decide. Do you want to leave a legacy of wealth or debt for your family? The choice is yours. Call me at 1-800-686-2237, extension 116. That's 1-800-686-2237, extension 116. Be proactive, not reactive. Call 1-800-686-2237, extension 116.
Summertime is save big time at Herbal Healer Academy. Long-term customers know summer is the time to stock up at herbalhealer.com. And for new customers, welcome to the web's best place to save on vitamins, minerals, and more. Log on for summer specials, including all sizes of colloidal silver, colloidal minerals, and intestinal freedom on sale. Choose from Herbal Healer's great variety of weight loss products like apple cider vinegar, Hoodia, and Metabolic Complex and Pro-Metabolic, all on sale now. Also, the anti-parasite intestinal freedom and Wormwood Plus Complex, plus stevia liquid sweetener and the super enzymes, all on sale for summer at herbalhealer.com. As always, we offer certificate correspondence courses in natural medicine. Enjoy same-day shipping and free online newsletter. Log on now to herbalhealer.com and look for summer specials to save big with our nation's leader in supplying quality natural medicine and education since 1988. Herbal Healer Academy.
Whoa! This is big!
By popular demand, the Freeze Dry Guy's giant factory authorized sale has been extended. Now through August, save 30 to 45% on number 10 cans of high-quality Mountain House freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy. Now's the time to stock up on all factory fresh stock of the finest, best-tasting, longest-proven shelf-life foods in the industry at giant savings of 30 to 45%. But hurry, supplies are limited, so this sale is only through the end of August. Call 866-404-3663. Free shipping to the lower 48 states. Click freezedryguide.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguide.com. Hurry! The giant factory authorized Mountain House sale with savings of 30 to 45% is extended through August from the Freeze Dry Guy, the finest freeze-dried and dehydrated foods available anywhere for long-term storage.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
With Gene and Chris, we have another Chris Rutkowski, longtime UFO investigator, and we'll talk about the survey in which he was involved, covering 25 years of Canadian UFO reports. Chris, welcome back to the Paracast.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back.
Let's focus on the first topic of the discussion here. You listened to part of the episode last week with our friend Robert Schaefer. And Robert Schaefer is not impressed with UFOs, not impressed with eyewitness testimony. And as I mentioned to you, I remarked in our previous segment that if what people say can't be relied upon, how do we rely upon what he has to say? What's your reaction, Chris?
Well, there's no question that witness testimony is always a little suspect. I mean, the argument is that witness testimony is enough to get you slammed into Sing Sing or Alcatraz under most conditions. So that's true. However, what happens is that there is procedures, there's additional testimony, there's other evidence that's added into that. I mean, there's no question that one should doubt witness testimony in a lot of cases because we come to observations and life with our own biases. We come with a lot of extra baggage that does tend to color our views of things. I mean, one only has to look at divorce proceedings in a in a court when you hear what he said versus she said, and it gets pretty messy sometimes. And the truth is somewhere in the middle very often. So I'd have to say, yes, you should doubt witness testimony, and in fact, don't rely on it completely, in fact, exclusively. But one has to assume that people are observing something in order to generate the responses. So I sort of agree with Schaefer to a certain extent, and I'm sure he would agree with me on that as well. But the problem is that one has to accept certain things. I mean, one accepts, well, here's an example, bird watchers. You know, bird watching is a very big hobby, and people are always collecting notes and exchanging notes on what birds were seen, how many, and so forth. And ornithologists use this to supply information to biologists for understanding migration patterns. A lot of it actually has to do with climate change. And, you know, it really feeds into a lot of other sciences, even though bird watching by itself isn't a scientific discipline, although you certainly do collect bird watching data through good methodology. So those observations are generally accepted, but you know, by themselves, they may not mean a lot of things to people, but they are used in a lot of circumstances. So I'd have to say that UFO data, while certainly suspect, and one must be suspect of witnesses' observations, you know, they are valuable to a certain extent. And that's kind of what we looked at through our 25 years, and also a recent study that I published this past week on analysis of satellite reentries versus UFOs. So there are a number of circumstances where witness testimony can be useful, and as long as it's useful but not exclusive to what you're talking about, I think we're fine.
So then, why do people like Robert Schaefer tend to get key details of a UFO case kind of screwed up? Now, I was thinking of Rendlesham, where he didn't seem to understand that these people were close up to a landed UFO, and there were ill effects reported by people like John Burroughs and Penniston. It's like he thinks they made it up years later.
Well, that's the back stance of a lot of skeptics and debunkers, that it couldn't possibly happen, therefore it didn't. And even with regard to some of the studies that we put out, the Canadian UFO Survey, where we simply collect and record and analyze what people have reported, skeptics often say that, oh, those reports can't be true, or that your data is obviously suspect. Well, it's not suspect because it's data. It's the interpretation that is the problem. You know, in the case of Rendlesham, I mean, it's a very complicated case, and people come to that case from different approaches. Certainly, the views of Peter Robbins and others with regard to Rendlesham have changed over the years, and there's a lot of debate as to what really happened and who's telling what and that type of thing. But there's no question that the incident occurred. Now, what that may be is another matter. And individuals who are, avowed skeptics and debunkers will look at the evidence with the viewpoint that it couldn't possibly have happened. People are lying. People have made it up. How can we really interpret this in any other way? And sometimes when you throw the baby out with the bathwater like that, you're left with a very empty tub and there's nothing left to be seen at all except maybe a ring. When you do that, you may be missing the point of the entire case. And I think there must be ways of handling cases without disavowing everything. I mean, I would not get very far if I'm interviewing a UFO witness about his or her experience, and my first point to make to the witness while I'm sitting there with him or her is, I know you really didn't see this, but tell me what happened anyways. I mean, that's simply not going to work. So one really has to spend some time listening and trying to interpret the raw data without allowing your own biases to creep into it.
The key is to ask them what happened, not lead them on.
Absolutely, yeah. And that would be true in any situation, not just ufology, but it certainly is important in ufology.
Unfortunately, that's also the problem if you try to do hypnotic regression. It's all too easy to lead the person on and have them deliver the conclusion that you want.
Oh, and that is very, very important. I had the good fortune of working with individuals in Toronto during the MIT conference proceedings and that type of thing, with regard to abductions and setting forth guidelines for abduction researchers. And it was very fascinating to sit down with some of the experts and the researchers who were laying out guidelines and recommendations for abduction researchers and therapists, most of whom simply didn't sign or acknowledge the guidelines and agreements. So it really went by the wayside. So it's a tricky issue, and something that I think really does need to be hammered out.
Do you have a general opinion about abduction since the subject has come up? What do you think is happening to these people? The key thing I see, before you answer, is that in a number of cases, people who supposedly were unaware of other reports of abductions produce the same basic fundamental details.
Yes, there's no question of that. Over the course of, I guess I've been at this for 35, going on 40 years now, and I got into the abduction situation very early on when somebody came to me after one of my lectures back in the 80s. And I've been, I guess since then, have had individuals come to me or email me for whatever reasons over the past number of years. I actually created a support group for abductees here in Canada quite a long time ago now, one of the first ones, and I facilitated it. I did as much reading on the literature as possible, consulted with a number of individuals. I thought it would be interesting to see what happens, and I was concerned that they wouldn't, the individuals who came out wouldn't be getting any expert guidance otherwise. I was actually working with a clinical psychologist on this, and there's no question in my mind that ufology is the wrong avenue and the wrong field for dealing with abductions. And the reason I say that is that I encountered case after case where individuals were clearly experiencing distress, ranging from something as simple as anxiety and depression, either because of or as a consequence or leading into the experience, or things as serious as rape and physical injury.
Let's explore the final answer to that in our next segment. Chris Rutkowski will be covering 25 years of Canadian UFO research and more about his views as to abductions in our next segment with Gene and Chris. You're in
The Paracast.
Independently leading the way for the nation. Compelling talk for every political persuasion. We are GCN.
Is there a secret UFO agenda? Do strange creatures from the darkest corners of the mind roam the earth? Is there evidence for mind control, time travel, or devious government conspiracies? Find out the inside scoop on the latest conspiracies, paranormal activity, and Fortean phenomena when you subscribe to Tim Beckley's Conspiracy Journal. It's jam-packed with stories, special book and DVD promotions, and the best news, it's absolutely free, sent right to your mailbox. Plus, a bonus free email newsletter sent out every Friday. Simply send an email with your name and address to Mr. UFO at webtv.net. That's Mr. UFO at webtv.net. Find out what they don't want you to know.
There's a guy named Dr. Wallach who is anything but your typical doctor. Both a veterinarian and a naturopathic physician, Doc asks, why is this country spending more money on healthcare by far and ranking 50th in health and longevity worldwide? Doc believes that people should empower themselves with a basic understanding of nutrition, taking charge of their life, and attaining optimal health and longevity through nutrition, not by toxic pharmaceutical drugs that lead to side effects that require more expensive and toxic pharmaceutical drugs. Talk about being dependent on drug companies to our own destruction, no less. This is clearly a deadly recipe. Doc Wallach's message is resonating with an increasing number of Americans who are waking up to all the government and big pharma manipulation of our health and healthcare system. I like what Doc Wallach is saying and doing to enlighten people about healthcare, and I've joined forces with him to help this tireless crusader spread his message. Visit brightsideben.com and listen to Doc Wallach's deadly recipe lectures. It makes a lot of sense, and I invite you to join our Brightside Ben team. Go to brightsideben.com. That's www.brightsideben.com.
Don't complain about your cable bill going up and up and up. Do something about it. Grab a pencil and jot down this special number, 1-855-905-MY-TV. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Say goodbye to the cable guy and get more of your favorite channels in 100% digital quality for less money. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99, and there's no equipment to buy. You get free HD TV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. You control what you watch when you watch it. Record your favorite shows, pause and rewind live TV, even skip the commercials. Watch local channels too. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Pull out your major credit or debit card. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut costs and get more. 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV.
This alert just came in. This special announcement is for business owners and leaders of organizations who've been waiting for the right time to build. General Steel has made it impossible to wait any longer with rock-bottom prices that could save you thousands. That's right, General Steel, America's leader in pre-engineered structures, is offering buildings at prices you will never see again. Don't miss these prices. A 50 by 100 for $35,000. You heard right, that's 5,000 square feet for $35,000. Manufacturers, if you need a larger building, try a 100 by 100 commercial building for $129,000. You can't afford to rent with these prices. Imagine a 70 by 100-foot church building for under $69,000. With the economy improving and interest rates still at historic lows, you can't afford to wait. So call 866-91-STEEL. Lock in your price now. Call 866-91-STEEL. That's 866-917-8335.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
So we're starting our focus with Chris Rutkowski on the Paracast with Gene and Chris on abductions. And before we broke, you had gotten into a discussion about some of the basics about the abductions. And maybe you want to continue in that vein?
Sure. And I was really just getting to the point that a lot of the individuals who had come to me ostensibly with an abduction story really had other issues, ranging from something as simple as anxiety or depression to something more serious, and a couple of cases of women who had experienced rape and other traumas. So this was completely beyond the purview of ufology, and so I felt completely obligated and then justified in referring them to psychologists and psychiatrists, not because I thought they were crazy, but because I thought that they certainly needed some help in dealing with some of the emotions and other health issues that were manifesting. In fact, the clinical psychologists I was working with, their goal was to help relieve people's anxiety and other issues surrounding the belief that the aliens were abducting them or bothering them or keeping watch of them and that type of thing. And in doing so, helping the abductees themselves come to terms with what's going on and help them that way. So that was the approach that was being taken. And that's obviously beyond what many abduction researchers do. And have as backgrounds and skill sets. So for that reason, I tend to dissuade ufologists from getting involved in the abduction situation. You know, having said that, I mean, there's some people who are doing some work and have been doing some long-standing work, and that's fine. My own views about abductions in general, in my book, Abductions and Aliens, What's Going On, I cite case after case after case of people who've come to me for assistance and help. And my view is to treat them with compassion and understanding, to try and get to the source of what's going on. And there are cases where I simply have no idea what's going on. There are cases where I think people have had some traumas in their lives, and that has manifested in a number of ways. In fact, that's been proven true over and over. In fact, I postulated something called alien abduction syndrome, where some people, not all, some people believe they've been abducted for whatever reasons because of issues in their lives. And yet there are cases, in fact, in the 25-year study, which just came out last week, I cited one case, which a lot of people picked up on, of a nurse who told me a very unusual story about how she had come from from her shift working in a hospital, and she, prefaced it by saying, "Look, I'm not into Star Trek and space operas and all that sort of stuff. I don't have time for TV and X-Files and all that thing. I'm very, very busy, and I don't have vivid dreams. But I had this weird experience." And she told me about how she had come home from a shift late at night in an apartment, come home, went into her bedroom, heard a noise outside, thinking it was a burglar, went into her living room and saw two creatures with round heads, very round eyes, very unusual, not typical at all for the classic aliens, but with long white robes and appeared to be mittens on their hands. And she thought perhaps they were Halloween pranksters or something like that. And yet, these creatures talked to her telepathically, according to her, asked her if she wanted to go visit some planets with them, invited her to come with them. And then all of a sudden she remembered that she was immediately transported to a very large hangar where there were a number of craft, both cigar and disc, was led into one of the cigar craft, led down a long gangway into the front where there was a control room where she was sat between the two of them, who manipulated dials and whatnot, and a screen in front of them showed that they were leaving Earth, traveling around a bit. And then the next thing she knows, she was back in her bedroom. It was about 3 or 4 hours later. She was sitting on her bed, not in her bedclothes. The bed had not been slept in, and she was completely puzzled as to what had occurred. And she simply, reached out to me saying, "Can you explain what happened? Can you tell me what happened?"
Yeah, sure.
And the woman had no reason to make anything up. She was not seeking publicity. She, in fact, shunned interviews from media. It was very, very puzzling. So what do you do with cases like that? I've had cases where an Air Force officer came into my office, sought me out, and explained that he believed that he had been abducted by aliens, and he certainly couldn't tell his commanding officer about it. Lord knows the armed forces have their own problems these days. And proceeded to tell me his experiences. When you get cases like that from people who are in professions where these things shouldn't happen, it really makes you wonder. So on the one hand, we have abduction cases that shouldn't and couldn't possibly happen, and yet we have a number of instances where we have people reporting these experiences. And I can't rationalize, I cannot justify dismissing all these cases out of hand, but I look at each one on a case-by-case basis, and I say, I think there's some good science that can be done. I think there's some good studies that can be done, good research, and certainly the help should be there for individuals who have had such experiences and come forward with them.
Well, Chris, you've been at this for decades now, and do you see a gradual curtailing of abduction reports over the last, let's say, 10 years? Or is it burbling along at the same level? And when did you see an increase in abduction reports?
Well, let's see now. I'd have to say that abduction reports probably peaked in the 90s. There's no question that that's when the most cases that I encountered were. Things continued on well into the 2000s. And I think there's been a decline, but a radical shift in what we're seeing. What my experience has been is that we're seeing a lot of abductee cases. And now what we're seeing is that the abductions have shifted into a contactee phase, which is interesting because that's how they started. The contactees of the 50s and 60s disappeared for a while, and then they've come back, in full force now, because a lot of the books that are now being published, a lot of the stories and cases that are being discussed at UFO conventions and wherever are really more contactee, where people are getting automatic writing, their telepathic communications, there's channeling, which is a throwback right back to the 1950s. And it's interesting that it's like the people who are experiencing and claiming contact right now are doing this in a vacuum, as if they had never, as if the 50s had never occurred whatsoever. And in fact, I took a look at some of the 1950s contactee cases and compared them to the 2010-ish contactee cases, and there's really no difference. So I suspect it's a a manifestation of the same phenomenon. And whether we're talking, people communicating with Orthon or somebody a little more contemporary.
Brother Boko, one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, we're seeing the same type of phenomena. So I think the abduction phenomenon peaked in the 90s, and it's really on the way out. In fact, most of the cases that I've encountered recently are more contactee rather than abductee.
Yeah. Did you see a real upswelling of cases begin?
Well, again, probably late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, so post Whitley Strieber communion then.
Yeah, somewhere in there. I mean, I remember reading Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, and there was a case in there that, according to the book at least, happened very close to me. And when I called him and I said, can you tell me a little bit more about this, because I could certainly assist you, he said, well, I'd actually changed the location. It didn't happen anywhere near you. But it was about that time that I started receiving many more abduction cases coming to me, and it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to help people best.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about kind of reverting back to the earlier style of UFO contacts, of course, they were highly disputed, especially contactees like George Adamski. Mm-hmm. Are people seeing gray aliens or the blonde Venusians and Martians of old? We'll have your answer in our next segment. Chris Rutkowski. We're talking about 25 years of Canadian UFO sightings, about contactees, about abductions, more to come with Gene and KK. You're in
the Paracast.
You're listening to GCN, proudly sponsored by UnseenNow.com. Lock down your digital life at UnseenNow.com. This is GCN.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
I didn't believe it. Neither did I. No way could you professionally remove unwanted hair, pain-free, and at home.
My thoughts exactly.
Remove my face and body hair without expensive, painful office visits?
Not possible. Great minds think alike.
Until I tried No Pro.
Mm-hmm. Wait, you tried No?
Yes, and it works. I use it on my face, legs, bikini line.
We're BFFs, and you didn't tell me about No?
Here, this is my new No Pro. The most powerful No made. Custom treatment levels, less hair in less time. Perfect for any skin type. Try it.
No hair, no pain, no time-consuming expensive office visits?
No, and no.
For a limited time, you can try No Pro risk-free. You'll also get the facial kit and a travel case. Get weeks of long-lasting results.
That's it. I'm getting a No.
Great minds do think alike.
Try No Pro risk-free by calling 800-952-5760. 800-952-5760. That's 800-952-5760. 800-952-5760.
We all know that Berkey Water Purification Systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 6 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey Water Filtration Systems. The Berkey Light Systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light System today, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $231, and the Berkey Guy will ship your order free of charge. With the purchase of a Berkey Light, the Berkey Guy is also offering a set of fluoride and arsenic filters for only $39.99. That's over 30% off the retail price. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at GoBerkey.com. That's GoBerkey.com today.
It's the heart of summer across America. Thoughts turn to childhood and long days of fun. Everybody would love to feel like a kid again. And HB Extract can be a vital tool in your battle to stay vibrant and young, as it supports healthy blood pressure and circulation while balancing cholesterol. GCN and longtime sponsor HB Extract want to help keep your heart healthy with the 30-bottle, 30-day summer giveaway. Enter to win by visiting GCNlive.com between now and August 29 and click on the contest banner in the top left corner of the page. HB Extract has helped tens of thousands of people worldwide feel good again, and they've done it with HB Extract's exclusive formula of wild, crafted, and organic herbs. Here's to you enjoying many more long, warm, and fun-filled summers, free of pain and sickness. Visit GCNlive.com and enter to win in the 30-bottle, 30-day summer giveaway with HB Extract. A healthy heart is a happy heart. Sign up now at GCNlive.com.
This is Leslie Kane, and I'm with the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and you are listening to the Paracast.
Now, when we have more than one Chris, we call Mr. O'Brien KK Barnes, okay?
Yes.
So we understand how that works. Chris Rutkowski is joining us. So I asked you the question about the form and nature of these new contacts. Are they seeing the same sort of beings that Adamski and Menger reported?
As a matter of fact, we are. We are seeing a lot of the blondes as opposed to the grays now. And I think that's an interesting shift, that people are reporting, communications telepathically with ethereal beings in some cases, beings of a higher level of development. And certainly the impression that we're getting is that the grays are more the physical phenomena, the physical manifestations, and the other types are more the spiritual and the ethereal. So that's what's coming through from the cases that we're getting. I have to point out, though, that in the 25 years of Canadian UFO reports, a very, very small fraction are abductions and contactee cases. In fact, there's probably only enough to name on one hand. But it is certainly a part of an aspect of the UFO phenomenon, which has been, certainly present in Canada as anywhere else in the world.
Let's go further into the 25 years of UFO cases. Now, I was looking at the numbers of cases each year, and I noticed you had more sighting reports in 2012 and 2013 than most of the previous years. Am I looking at that correctly?
Yes. In fact, there is a peak back in 2012. We're not entirely sure why. In fact, things seem to have gone down a little bit since then, but even so, last year was still one of the highest numbers on record. Cases in general, in fact, it was interesting to read some of the reports and stories that have been in the news and some of the UFO publications about UFO reports seem to be on the decline. There's hardly any reported anymore, etc. When in fact, if you actually look at the data, the numbers are increasing, have been increasing fairly constantly since the 90s. We began the Canadian UFO survey in the late 1980s. Things have certainly increased fairly steadily since then. Now, one can point to the wider use of the internet. One can point to a number of ways in which people can report UFOs now. And back in the 80s and early 90s, people were limited, not exclusively, but phone calls and telexes and letters and that type of thing. With the internet becoming so widely used back in the 90s and this blossoming now, it's so easy for people to report UFO sightings, and they are reporting them in great numbers to a number of UFO websites. So that's part of it. Although when you look at the various sources that we're relying upon, that seems to remain fairly constant. So I would have to say that the UFO cases, the numbers of UFO reports themselves are going up. Is it that people are seeing more things, or are they paying more attention? I like to say that we're living in the Steven Spielberg generation, or maybe the Michael Bay generation. I'm not sure. It's a later generation, but in a generation where aliens are a commonplace, they're widely accepted. It's assumed that the aliens are out there and would want to visit Earth. So with that background now, I think people are spending some time looking up with the understanding that maybe some of those lights and things moving up there may be aliens. And, I know somebody who wants to hear about it because I saw it on a website, so I'll report it. So there's a number of factors at work here. But the reality is that over the past 25 years, we've received and looked at around 15,000 UFO reports in Canada. And that's actually more than Project Blue Book looked at during its run, which is quite interesting. I think their run was about 18 or 19 years. Ours is 25, so it's a little bit off. But when you look at the fact that they have the entire resources of the United States Air Force at disposal, whereas Ufology Research has been largely just consisting of a few investigators here and there and dedicated individuals who've been spending some time looking at cases themselves without any monetary gain or resources at all.
Now, let's look at something else. Now, in the Project Blue Book report, there were 701 unexplained cases, which was 20-some-odd%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what percentage of those cases that you explored do you regard as unknowns?
We had a first pass, and I think it was something like 13 or 14% unknown. So we actually had a little bit lower than Blue Book. But once we actually started looking into those cases, and we spent some time going through them. As a matter of fact, my colleagues Jeff Dittman and Ashley Kitcher spent some time in my living room going through case after case after case of all the high-quality unknowns, looking for the best of the best of the best. And it was interesting to look through some of them and being a little more discriminating. And we brought that down to somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 or 2%. Now, that seems low when you consider the Project Blue Book unknowns were 20%. But even the 1%, when you're looking at 15,000 cases, is still very, very significant. And when we talk about the high quality unknowns, you have to remember that these are cases that were investigated by civilians. So in many cases, we don't have Air Force reports and analysis and discussion between various individuals in military observations and that type of thing. But we have cases that may contain government investigation, RCMP investigation by the Air Force, cases where there's evidence, cases where there's a lot of documentation as to what happened and no questions, sometimes physical evidence, often photographic evidence. And so we were perhaps a little more discriminating than Project Blue Book, and yet we still were left with a very, very significant number of cases, which are a little head-scratching.
Okay, looking at these numbers here. Now, did you get any cooperation at all from your Air Force in putting this information together?
Well, I have to say that cooperation is a odd way of putting it, but yeah, I would say that we had some good cooperation from the Canadian Armed Forces, as we did from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Transport Canada, which is a Canadian equivalent of the FAA, and a number of other organizations. And the reason we can say that is because we actually do have these reports. In fact, up until about 1995, so as the study was running and winding down, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police had a directive to investigate UFOs on behalf of the Canadian National Research Council, which would have kind of be the equivalent of the Smithsonian in the States, because they were trying to locate some meteorites. And the idea is that a lot of UFOs in the sky were nothing more than meteors and fireballs. And if you followed all the witness reports and directions and that type of thing, you'd eventually find a meteorite on the ground, which would be valuable to science. And that actually happened in a couple of cases where witness reports were able to allow astronomers to find a meteorite on the ground. Now, what happened is that in about 1995-ish or so, the individuals in charge of the meteoritics in the National Research Council passed away in some cases and lost funding, and the entire Canadian Space Agency changed direction. So the RCMP were no longer required to do that. However, the reports continued to come in because people were used to reporting UFOs to RCMP and Air Force and so forth. And I remember meeting, because my background is in astronomy, I was at a meeting of astronomers in Ottawa, and I remember meeting with someone from the National Research Council complaining bitterly about these UFO cases coming in. I said, well, if you want, you can always send them to me, because I'm interested in what people are reporting, and maybe we can still find some meteorites. And it was a few years later, I think it was 2000, when I started getting reports that were filed and made available to various Canadian government organizations. And so for times after that, I sort of became the Fox Mulder of Canada, where I actually was getting, reports from Air Force officers, RCMP, and so forth. And all the RCMP cases up until 1995 had always been made available to Canadian citizens. In other words, there was no disclosure necessary, because the reports that were filed made their way into the National Archives, which were always available. And what's happened is that over the past, I guess, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the National Archives has been digitizing their collection. And all the reports since then have been made available as well. So disclosure isn't an issue in Canada with regard to these cases, because we have the RCMP, RCAF, and other cases that are widely available.
Let's do the break here.
Okay.
Chris Rutkowski telling us about 25 years of Canadian UFO reports, some 15,000 cases in all. With Gene and KK Barnes, sometimes known as Chris O'Brien, you're in
the Paracast.
Great minds think alike. The network for the independent-minded. The Genesis Communications Network. GCN.
Good people need help. The Homeowners Association said we had weeds and fined us $25. We told them they had the wrong house. They said if we didn't pay it, they'd file a lien. Our attorney demanded photographs, witnesses, and told them if they couldn't provide this, they must cease and desist. Issue solved. Worry less and live more with lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com, or call 855-340-SAVE. That's 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
The Genesis Communications Network is one of America's premier broadcasters of captivating talk radio. We thank you for listening. Now, just imagine, there are thousands of people who are just as passionate about radio as you are. But what you may not realize is how easy and affordable it is to advertise with us. Radio commercials for your business could be heard on hundreds of radio stations across the U.S. every day. We can help you by creating an effective radio advertising campaign for your company. From script writing to producing your commercial, just like the one you're listening to right now. No other network provides the level of customer service we do. When it comes to radio advertising, we are your one-stop shop. And no matter how big or small your business is, we can help. Email us at advertise@gcnlive.com, and an experienced advertising executive will help you take the first step towards driving more customers to your business or website. Advertise@gcnlive.com. Easy, affordable, effective.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
All right, this is getting really fascinating here. It's almost like it's the polar opposite in Canada of getting copies of reports. Here, you want to contact the authorities. You got to get the Freedom of Information requests, and unfortunately, it appears that the Obama administration is a little more stringent about that. Do you try to coordinate the big UFO cases you explored with possible repercussions in this country?
The problem is that, ever since Blue Book finished, we really don't have access to official records in the United States of what people are seeing and reporting. So there is a bit of a gap there. But if we can, look at the Canadian situation as a good example of what might be happening, we can probably assume, and you're not supposed to assume, but I think in this case you can, that in the United States, just as many cases are occurring and being reported, but we simply don't have access to all those reports. So I think there are a lot of reports that are floating around out there somewhere. I mean, no question that Peter Davenport and MUFON more recently and a number of other individuals are recording cases from the public, and we certainly use those in our data for Canada. So I think the United States is very well represented. I think the general rule of thumb that we have is that Canada is probably 10% less than the United States in terms of numbers of UFO cases, and that's proven true in a number of situations. So I'm guessing if we have 15,000 cases over the past 25 years, there's probably 150,000 cases in the United States, if not more. And that's simply going by population predictions and things like that. So there's a lot of cases out there, and it is very good that there are individuals like Peter Davenport and others who are compiling this data so that they can be used in scientific methodology approaches to studying the UFO phenomenon.
Are you in touch with NARCAP at all also?
We've got some cases from NARCAP. Transport Canada, the equivalent of FAA, as I mentioned, does provide us with information on pilot cases from time to time. It's not a smooth transition. It's not seamless, but we do get cases reported from airports in Canada, which automatically go into our annual Canadian UFO survey. So our annual studies, which we accumulated to produce the 25-year study, really do get a good cross-section of what people are reporting, not only from the lay public, but we get cases from pilots, from air traffic controllers, from armed forces personnel, in some cases from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as well. So we're getting good reports from good observers. That allows us to say, we really think there is a real phenomenon that's being observed by so many people in Canada. There have been polls that have been conducted. We were part of one poll back a number of years ago that affirmed 10% of the population in Canada believe they've seen UFOs. There have been similar polls in the United States through Gallup and a few other organizations that, verify that it's 10%. So if you're looking at 10% of the population who've seen UFOs, in Canada alone, that's 3 or 4 million. In the United States, you're looking at 30, 40, 50 million. There's a lot of people out there who are seeing UFOs, and we simply don't have records for a vast majority of them.
Before we get more into the nuts and bolts, obviously only a fraction of the people who see UFOs ever bother to report them. And I understand a reluctance, say, on the part of airline pilots, where they might not want their reputations tarnished by reporting these things. But how do we encourage regular people to report what they've seen?
That's a good question. I think it's a matter of public education. I know up in here in Canada, astronomy is almost vanished from the middle school and high school curriculum. There's so many other issues that are considered more important, so it's even tougher dedicated teachers to get astronomy, let alone UFOs, included into a curriculum. There are a few cases where that's an exception, but in the United States and around the world, ufology and the UFOs, the facts about UFOs, is something that's hard to get across. So I think certainly public education programs, certainly podcasts like yours, certainly getting some media attention through annual studies will certainly contribute to this. And I guess we have to mention the TV shows at one point that raise people's awareness, not necessarily providing facts, but they certainly raise people's awareness. And I hope that people, engage in some lively discussion after watching some of the shows that are being produced.
Unfortunately, some of those shows have less than stellar reputations for factual accuracy. Do you think that's a mixed bag, that people get a false impression of what the subject is all about because of what they see? Or is the fact that they're just aware that things are going on sufficient to have them report?
Well, there's no question that there's issues of accuracy. There's issues of the way in which the data is presented. I mean, Kurt Collins caught me on an interesting one where I was quoted for the Close Encounters TV show. I was asked to comment on the Cash Landrum case, and somewhere in my reading of so many cases over the years, I had thought I'd heard something about lightning bolts or energy bolts or something like that emanating from the craft, in addition to the heat waves, which was apparently wrong. So there's little facts like that creep into cases and become part of the UFO milieu.
Yeah, I bet you the skeptics jumped all over that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't trust. You can't trust us at all. To me, the issue in the Cash Landrum case, for example, is, well, did it happen at all? What about the medical effects? What about the site itself? Were there helicopters flying in the air? The lawsuit that was launched against the United States by the individuals involved. I mean,
why did they replace that whole section of road where the event allegedly occurred?
Yeah, there's so many issues involved in there that again, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater by pointing at a few details that you can always look up. In fact, when I was questioned about this after the fact, I said, well, if you look up the details of the case, and there's a number of very good accounts of the case, you can see that there's a lot more to the case than what we've simply covered in a 5-minute segment on television. So, yes, I think that there are some very important ways in which we can communicate to the public through television. Yes, a lot of the TV shows are wanting because they're really entertainment rather than anything else. I know that I'm part of the 701 movie that's in the works right now. Close Encounters second season has been filmed, and I'm part of that as well. There's a show that's being aired right now in the United States for the first time, a Canadian production called Indians and Aliens, specifically about Aboriginal sightings and experiences with UFOs. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but it's like that everywhere on TV. I mean, you can watch schlock on TV, or you can watch some good stuff, try and read up on it. I would hope that people aren't just ingesting all this stuff without thinking about what they're actually watching. Unfortunately, I'm sure that's the case in many situations.
Right. Well, you mentioned the Cash Landrum case. Of course, it's famous for the physical effects that the witnesses experienced, actually very detrimental physical effects. Now, one of the best cases, I think, that we have from anywhere is the famous Stephen Michalak case from 1967 at Falcon Lake, where he had a burn pattern on his clothing and on his, I think, chest, wasn't it? Yep. From what he claimed was the UFO's exhaust port. This question comes from Burnt State, one of our posters at forum.theparacast.com. And he asks, as someone who has investigated this story, just how important do you feel this case is in the annals of ufology, and why?
Well, I think it's very, very important, and it's probably, even though it's been discussed and recreated in a number of TV shows and it's in a couple of books, I think it hasn't been emphasized enough. When you look at what's involved, that we have a fellow who's a former military officer, has an experience encountering apparently physical craft. There's physical effects in the environment. There were pine needles and other tree branches and whatever that were burned in the area. He's physiologically injured. He was taken to the Mayo Clinic for study. But there's a lot of other details. The area was actually considered being cordoned off by the Canadian government because of high radiation. In fact, there were some nuclear waste dumps that were actually investigated to see if anybody had broken in and taken any nuclear waste material out of there to seed the site. That was how serious it was taken. The case was investigated not only by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Air Force, but also the United States Air Force. It is included in the Condon Report. It is included in a number of other sites and sources. And what's most fascinating is that the witness, Stefan Michalak, never actually talked in terms of aliens. Until his death, he thought he had experienced or had some encounter with a secret American space vehicle. It was under some sort of test that went awry.
Chris Rutkowski joins Gene and Chris O'Brien, or KK. You're in
the Paracast.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on our distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
Do you need a website? Well, you can get a great deal on hosting services with Namecheap's legendary coupon code. They're offering substantial hosting discounts on shared hosting, business hosting, VPS hosting, reseller hosting, and even dedicated servers. Namecheap is preferred by millions. It's backed by a money-back guarantee. Use the coupon code LEGENDARY to cash in on the special deal at Namecheap.com, Namecheap.com.
Making the right decisions is a challenge to investors. Are we going to see economic growth, slide into a recession, or at worst, depression? Hi, Ted Anderson from Midas Resources. We all know when a company acts irresponsibly, divesting ourselves in a move towards safety is prudent. When the market becomes volatile, U.S. Treasuries are a safe haven. But what do you do when the U.S. government overextends itself and spends beyond its means? Many investors are turning toward gold as a common-sense alternative to traditional paper investments. Midas Resources has put together a powerful book titled 10 Reasons to Own Gold, discussing costs, benefits, risks, featuring full-color illustrations, weights, and measures. The book is free and can be yours by calling 800-686-2237. Paper investments are dwarfed by gold's 6,000-year history. Discover how gold may be right for you and your IRA by calling 800-686-2237. Whether buying or it's time for you to sell, the book is free. Call 800-686-2237.
At 30dayfoodsupply.com, you can now purchase a one-of-a-kind product not available anywhere else. A meatless burger dry mix in 4 delicious flavors. With our new Oregon Trail Foods vegan burgers, all you do is add water and fry. They need no refrigeration. They're packaged in Mylar bags with an oxygen absorber for a long shelf life. They're non-GMO. They're gluten, soy, nut, and chemical-free, but they're loaded with flavor. And a good source of carbs and protein, yet low in sodium. Flavors include Italian, spicy Mexican, 6-vegetable, and black bean olive. Go to 30dayfoodsupply.com or call 541-229-0010 and order today. Eat them every day, take them camping, or save them for an emergency. Check them out at 30dayfoodsupply.com and click on the vegan burger icon. That's 30dayfoodsupply.com, where all of our products are produced in Oregon by Oregon Trail Foods. 30dayfoodsupply.com.
This alert just came in. This special announcement is for business owners and leaders of organizations who've been waiting for the right time to build. General Steel has made it impossible to wait any longer with rock-bottom prices that could save you thousands. That's right, General Steel, America's leader in pre-engineered structures, is offering buildings at prices you will never see again. Don't miss these prices. A 50 by 100 for $35,000. You heard right, that's 5,000 square feet for $35,000. Manufacturers, if you need a larger building, try a 100 by 100 commercial building for $129,000. You can't afford to rent with these prices. Imagine a 70 by 100-foot church building for under $69,000. With the economy improving and interest rates still at historic lows, you can't afford to wait. So call 866-91-STEEL. Lock in your price now. Call 866-91-STEEL. That's 866-917-8335.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
Chris Rutkowski is with us, so when we broke, he was mentioning the fact that the witness thought of it as maybe a test aircraft. It doesn't matter what they think, it's what happened that counts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we have, the witness was available for interviews over and over and over again. The site was accessible. As a matter of fact, it's not quite the end of the summer yet. If anybody in the United States want to come up to Canada, they actually have a horseback tour of the area where this occurred. Well, they'll take you on a pack horse tour up into the wilderness and guide you and tell you what happened to Mr. Mihalik back in 1967. There's T-shirts available. I suppose it's kind of Canada's Roswell in a certain way. And the other factor is that we have documents, and from the United States, from the United States Air Force, but from the Royal Canadian Air Force, Canadian Forces at the time. We have the reports from the RCMP, and I'm talking not just a few documents. We're looking at hundreds of pages of documents which are available about this instance. And there really aren't very many cases in UFO literature that are so well documented. I mean, an available witness, a site that's accessible, plus official documents. That's really quite remarkable, and I think it's something that really deserves a little more attention than it's getting.
What did the Condon Committee conclude about that case?
The Condon Committee actually listed the case as unexplained in its index. And I think this was the case that suggested along the lines of, I have to look up the quote, but I think it was one where they said that if the case is proven correct, it would definitely prove the existence of unidentified flying objects in our environment, which would be an understatement to say the least. On the other hand, I know that Roy Craig believed that it was a hoax, based on the fact that the site was not found when the military and RCMP officers took Mr. Mihalik back out to the area. They tromped around in the wilderness for quite a while, apparently, but he was disoriented, couldn't find the site. And when the site was actually found sometime later, he didn't report to them. He reported actually to a local UFO group who went out there and looked at it with him, and that immediately lent some suspicion that perhaps he had made up the entire thing. In fact, when I was involved in a reinvestigation of the case back in the 1970s, I was speaking with a nuclear physicist who was of the opinion that Mr. Mihalik had actually fallen on a barbecue grill. That's how he burned himself. And the radiation was explained by the fact that for some reason he was trying to create his own nuclear bomb by banging rocks of pitchblende or uranium together. It was such a preposterous idea that I found it hard to believe that
someone actually came up with that as an explanation.
It was a nuclear physicist. It was actually quite interesting. In fact, the barbecue explanation was the one that really threw me, because the marks on Mihalik's body, if you just imagine a barbecue grill, there's the lines in one direction and the lines in the other direction. The marks on Mihalik's body were actually round dots. So in other words, the opposite of a barbecue grill.
Well, it may have been a test barbecue grill.
A test barbecue grill, right, yeah. So a lot of explanations have been postulated for this case. In one of my reports on it, I say, okay, if it's a hoax, I mean, the fact that so many man-hours were spent looking for it, I would be surprised if the Canadian government, wouldn't have, just charged this guy, because, I mean, when you're talking radiation and the possibility of breaking into a nuclear waste site and going on from there, well, why wouldn't it be taken more seriously than it was? So I don't think it was a hoax. I had the opportunity, oddly enough, of knowing the Mihalik family as a child, because I used to play, ride my bikes and stuff like that with one of his sons. And so I knew the family quite well. And, they were very sincere. They had no reason whatsoever to make the story up. They did not seek publicity. In fact, they tried to avoid publicity because they were bombarded with so much back in the 1960s. I don't think it was a hoax. Now, is it a possible fabrication after the fact? That's one thing that's been proposed, because there was radioactive pieces of silver found in a crack in the rock over which this object was supposed to have been hovering. The radioactive silver was very unusual. One would not expect that. I mean, what's going to happen? A spaceship is going to leak radioactive silver or something? Very, very strange. It's possible that somebody tried to make the case look even better, or, undermine it along the way. So I think there's a lot more questions that need answering with regard to this case. Dismissing it as a hoax doesn't really explain a lot of the effects and answer a lot of the questions that have arisen since the case became famous or infamous. So I think it remains one of the more interesting cases, not only in Canada, but anywhere in the world.
Me to a question from a fellow Canuck. Randall, who runs USI in Calgary, has a question that he posted at forum.theparacast.com where you can ask our guests any question you'd like. And if we think it's worthy, we'll read it. He's wondering if you have any other cases besides the McCulloch case that involves human or animal injury, illness, or death.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think if there have been. I think there were a few cases. I seem to recall that there was a case in Charleswood, Manitoba, back in the 1960s as well, where there were some medical effects. People were getting headaches as a cause of some UFOs that were seen, and a landing where the actual landing area gave people headaches. But in terms of injuries, I'm trying to remember of some that come to mind in Canada over the past number of years. Nothing's coming to mind. Certainly nothing that we would have medical records for. So I can't recall any.
Good. People are at least staying away when they're on the ground.
I hope so.
Yeah, run away. Well, we do have a bunch of questions here. I'm going to fire a couple of these at you. And one of the ones that people are asking about, of course, is the and one that's been, the debunkers have had some fun with, is the case that I think it was Jim Oberg debunked as saying that it was re-entry of a Soviet, the second stage of a Soviet rocket. I believe that was up in the Yukon in 1996, if I'm correct.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the it's the one that Jim Oberg said that the witnesses were actually seeing the second stage re-entry of a Cosmos 2335 rocket. This question comes from Burnt State.
Yeah, it's a very interesting case, and I know that Oberg cites it. The work was actually done by Ted Malzahn, who's one of the people on CSAT who study satellite reentries and make lists of them and so forth. In fact, I had emails from Ted just this morning. It's interesting that we're getting some good dialogue going between skeptics and ufologists.
Well, that would be a change, and we'll have to cover this more in our next segment where you can flesh this out. Reminder, go to theparacast.com, sign up for our weekly newsletter, get a free copy of the ebook version of Chris O'Brien's Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. It is free. Chris Rutkowski joins us. You're in
the Paracast.
You're listening to GCN, proudly sponsored by UnseenNow.com. Lock down your digital life at UnseenNow.com. This is GCN.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code NIGHTOWL. Use the coupon code NIGHTOWL to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's LEMKE soft.com. lemkesoft.com. LEMKE soft.com.
On Facebook, on the news, and in conversations with friends, we're bombarded every day with advice on how to be healthier, from gluten-free and non-GMO diets to how much exercise and sleep the body needs. But how much have you heard about alkalizing the body? AlkaVision Plasma pH drops are a holistic and natural way to get your body's pH levels back in balance. Just a few drops in water will help your body rid itself of harmful waste. And even the healthiest of diets can be complemented with your daily use of AlkaVision Plasma pH drops. Who isn't looking for more vibrance, vigor, and energy? Now buy 2 bottles of AlkaVision Plasma pH drops and get $10 off your order. Visit alkavision.com or call 800-518-7615. AlkaVision Plasma pH drops are packed with a powerful combination of the most alkaline minerals and compounds. Open the door to greater health, vitality, and zest for life. Alkalize your body. Supercharge your health. Call 800-518-7615 or head to alkavision.com.
What good is a Big Berkey water filter?
We get that question a lot here at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. And in a word, the answer is protection. Protection from water main breaks, E. coli contamination, environmental chemical spills, pesticide runoff, chlorine taste and smell, and all forms of fluoride. Plus, Big Berkey water filters are the original gravity water filter system and most trusted on the market for a reason. Tested by multiple independent NSF EPA certified labs, they are the gold standard in water purification. At only 1.7 cents a gallon, a single set of filters can last for 5 to 10 years. That means big savings. Big Berkey, the one that's powerful enough to purify stagnant pond water. Get a Big Berkey today at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. GCN listeners receive 5% off all ceramic filter systems. Visit our website or call 1-877-99-BERKEY. That's 877-99-BERKEY. Big Berkey Water Filters, for the love of clean water.
Don't complain about your cable bill going up and up and up. Do something about it. Grab a pencil and jot down this special number, 1-855-905-MY-TV. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Say goodbye to the cable guy and get more of your favorite channels in 100% digital quality for less money. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99, and there's no equipment to buy. You get free HD TV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. You control what you watch when you watch it. Record your favorite shows, pause and rewind live TV, even skip the commercials. Watch local channels too. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Pull out your major credit or debit card. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut costs and get more. 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
So when we have that inevitable clock, that computerized clock that says break now or forever hold your peace, Chris Rutkowski was formulating his answer to KK's question. Now, has stop it, but let's continue now.
Sure. Yeah, the Fox Lake case, many people have probably seen it now. A very large object was seen by about 30 witnesses at least as it moved ponderously over a lake and over some mountains. It was investigated by a very dedicated researcher, Martin Jasek, and he tracked down all the witnesses themselves who didn't have any knowledge of each other. The case had actually not been reported. In fact, this particular case was never part of our Canadian UFO survey because it occurred in 1996 in December, and it didn't become public knowledge or wasn't actually accessed by us until well into 1997, so it wasn't part of the 1996 data. But it's one of the more interesting ones ever recorded. A lot of people saw a large object with windows moving along. People had seen from one end of the lake to the other. The time difference was actually quite significant. So there was a very interesting, well-observed UFO case. And quite recently, Ted Mulson determined that what was being seen was actually the reentry of a spacecraft. And what's curious about that is it does seem to be visible at the exact time that some of the reports were occurring. The problem that we're having is that I'm not convinced that all of the observations fit the explanation. In fact, there's some interesting reports where there was a couple or two men traveling about a kilometer or a mile apart, and they both saw the object. The person in the lead they were both driving in separate vehicles. The person in the lead stopped his vehicle, got out, and looked up and said that this object, which he drew as a disc-shaped object with a round light underneath, passed directly over him. The person who was stopped some distance away was looking towards the other vehicle, his colleague, and saw this large object with windows or whatever pass over the car ahead of him. Now, if this was actually a reentry of a satellite, that could not happen because this object, the satellite, was reentering very high up in the atmosphere, and we're talking of the order of 150 kilometers, something like that. So it's quite high, possibly getting down lower to about 100, and this angle difference wouldn't work. So the argument is that these observations where the object is passing overhead must be mistaken, and people's estimate of angles are really bad. There's actually a couple of other people who said that they saw the object pass overhead and described it as a large disc-shaped object as well. So the skeptics are simply saying that the people's descriptions are wrong and what they actually saw were the space junk. And it's been said from time to time that space junk entering the atmosphere often looks like a cigar-shaped object with windows. And, that's valid to a certain extent. What's curious and what's very, very new, in fact, just over the past few days, is that I've made available a study that I conducted. And it's only been available, or only been possible to do this recently because Ted Malzin's report on the reentries that were visible and possibly identifiable as UFOs has only been recently made available. And the 25-year study that I've done has only been recently been made available. And what I did is I pushed the two together. I said, how many of the cases in the 25-year study over the past 25 years, quarter century, are reentries that are on this list of reentries that should be visible over North America? And it turns out there's, 14 that match. And sure enough, we get reports. It's very easy. In fact, we've made available the data itself on our website for people to look at. And yes, there are reports of UFOs that were filed and reported a number of agencies, not only official agencies like the Air Force and so forth, but also to civilian organizations that match the times of the reentry of certain satellites. What is most interesting is that people don't typically, or had not typically reported long cigar-shaped objects with windows. What was reported were fireballs. In fact, in most of the cases, the UFO investigators themselves listed the UFOs as having explanations, in other words, IFOs, because they sounded like satellites re-entering. So what seems to be is that in about 94% of the reports that match the re-entries, they were not considered UFOs at all. They were actually considered space junk re-entering fireballs, that type of thing, correctly identifying what they were. So what I'm suggesting as one interpretation is that UFO investigators and witnesses are actually a lot better than widely purported by some of the skeptics and debunkers. In other words, a UFO witness who sees the reentry of a satellite or a rocket booster is going to report an object that looks like a reentry of a satellite or a rocket booster for the most part.
So people's descriptions match the facts in this particular case.
They do. So the question is then, why would this particular case in Fox Lake in the Yukon in 1996 be so different, where people were reporting large structured objects and not fireballs in a re-entering satellite? To me, that's quite curious and suggests there's more to it than meets the eye. Sorry for the pun and literally there. But it does suggest that there's more to the case than that. And even if it is the case that all the witnesses, all 35 or so of them, all saw this particular satellite booster re-entering, the question is, why are the interpretations so different? So I would argue there's still much that can be learned from studying this particular case, and dismissing it out of hand probably is not warranted.
Right. Well, this brings up an interesting point that I've encountered from time to time, and that is witnesses reporting mundane objects such as planes, in a case or two birds, that then appear to morph into a classic UFO shape. And when we come back from our break, I'd like to get your, your opinion on some of these cases that I'm sure you have in your database, and what could be operative here.
You want to answer that briefly, Chris? And
I
we'll do the
was
break?
going to wait
Sure.
until after the break.
Right. No, it's okay. We got 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, there are cases where objects changed shape and appearance. There's no question of that. I know that some of the cases that I've looked at were video cases and photographic cases where the objects seem to change from, a disc shape to two balls next to one another, back again, that type of thing. And those are certainly optical effects. But in other cases where people said they were seeing birds and then the birds suddenly changed into an aircraft that zoomed over their heads, I really don't know what to think of those. And the problem is that what do you do with these really, really strange cases that come to you as UFO data? There's certainly not standard stars, airplanes, helicopters, and so forth. There's something else at work here. And, it just adds to the mystery of trying to figure out the entire UFO phenomenon. And that's why I think we have to have some decent investigation going on. In fact, one of my biggest concerns is that most UFO sightings that are reported are not investigated. And to me, that's one of the biggest problems in ufology right now.
All right, that's a good point there. And one we'll get ready to break on. But first, let me remind our listeners, once again, we have this great book that Chris O'Brien wrote a few years back called Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. There's an ebook version, and I'll tell you what we're going to do. Due to Chris's generosity, I didn't browbeat him to do this, folks. We'll offer a free copy of the ebook version if you subscribe to our weekly Paracast newsletter. Go to theparacast.com, theparacast.com. Right there above the fold is a link. You enter your email address, you sign up, you get the newsletter, and you get the book. We have Chris Rutkowski joining us with Gene and Mr. O'Brien. You're in
the Paracast.
Not just an alternative to the mainstream media. We're the premier independent talk radio network. We are GCN.
So here's what happened. I was placing an order online. The site went down. It took hours before it returned, but I'd already placed the order with another company. If your site goes down, you could lose business. And if you have a business or personal site, you'll want to know it's easy to run and it will stay online. At iWeb, your site is hosted on one of the most reliable networks in the world. Talk to a sales rep at iWeb.com. Use the promo code TechNightOwl for a special discount.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there is The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on her distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
A sudden change in the wind. The day grows dark as ominous clouds move in and lightning begins to carve arcs in the sky. And you realize you are not prepared.
I am telling you to take cover.
The number of intense storms is increasing exponentially in the U.S. Tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding, and droughts are happening with greater magnitude and frequency. If you are choosing to rely on the government to save you,
And no one's coming to help them.
you could be dead wrong. The first step towards self-reliance in the face of disaster is a visit to mypatriotsupply.com. There you'll find the absolute best prices on storable foods, non-GMO seeds, emergency water filtration devices, and so much more. All orders over $49 qualify for free shipping in the lower 48. Visit us online or call 866-229-0927. That's 866-229-0927 and speak to one of our preparedness advisors today. Remember, before it's time to survive, it's time to prepare. mypatriotsupply.com.
If you need to say happy birthday, happy anniversary, thank you, or simply I'm thinking of you, ProFlowers.com is the key. ProFlowers has stunning bouquets, like the best-selling 100 blooms for $19.99. Plus, ProFlowers will include a glass vase for free. Sending someone a wonderful surprise of beautiful flowers sent fresh from the fields is easy. Choose the bouquet you like, Pick the delivery date, and each order is 100% guaranteed. Plus, all bouquets from ProFlowers are guaranteed to last at least 7 full days. Beautiful, fragrant flowers, picked fresh and sent to your loved one for lasting enjoyment. To get this incredible savings and send someone 100 gorgeous blooms with a free vase for $19.99, go to proflowers.com. Click the blue microphone in the top right corner and enter code PLOW. That's proflowers.com. Click the mic and enter code PLOW.
It's the heart of summer across America. Thoughts turn to childhood and long days of fun. Everybody would love to feel like a kid again. And HB Extract can be a vital tool in your battle to stay vibrant and young, as it supports healthy blood pressure and circulation while balancing cholesterol. GCN and longtime sponsor HB Extract want to help keep your heart healthy with the 30-bottle, 30-day summer giveaway. Enter to win by visiting GCNlive.com between now and August 29 and click on the contest banner in the top left corner of the page. HB Extract has helped tens of thousands of people worldwide feel good again, and they've done it with HB Extract's exclusive formula of wild, crafted, and organic herbs. Here's to you enjoying many more long, warm, and fun-filled summers, free of pain and sickness. Visit GCNlive.com and enter to win in the 30-bottle, 30-day summer giveaway with HB Extract. A healthy heart is a happy heart. Sign up now at GCNlive.com.
This is Leslie Kane, and I'm with the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and you are listening to the Paracast.
See the respect with which we hold my co-host. It's not Chris or KK, it's Mr. O'Brien, right? He doesn't want to say anything about that. Okay. By the way, that noise there that you heard, that's my iPhone telling me that a local teriyaki dinner type place is offering a Thai meal. I don't understand that. Chris Rutkowski is joining us. We're not going to talk about food. That's on a different show. We're talking about UFOs, UFO cases. But I just wanted to bring in the comparison, moving into the Cash Landrum case, obviously not in your country. Do you find that and the older case where someone suffered nasty after effects to be similar in many respects or any respects?
Yeah, there's no question that there are similarities between Cash Landrum and the Mihalik case. Both seem to be burned by a thermal effect of some sort, which does suggest, something mechanical, that there is some sort of heat that was generated. And certainly if you're close to an exhaust from a vehicle of some sort, that'll certainly be one of the effects. There have been a number of other cases where that's been manifesting. So I would say that there are some similarities, for people to look at if they're looking at these individual cases.
Okay, now what about Rendlesham? Again, we have nasty side effects.
Certainly nasty side effects. And we certainly have a number of theories. I mean, remember the good old lighthouse theory that was proposed first of all, and that goes back to Jenny Randles and others quite a long time ago. Brenda Butler, I think, in her book too, had something like that. But the reality is that something happened just outside an airbase, and there were military observers. Now, to me, that alone suggests that the case should be investigated a little bit more thoroughly, not only by the military investigators, but by civilian investigators, because the military witnesses are available for talking with now. And there are a number of different versions that are bobbing around like now, and there's a lot of controversy. I've read the controversy surrounding the latest book that's come out. It unfortunately, all it's doing is muddying the waters, really, because it calls into question whether the incident happened at all. It calls into question whether the witnesses, some of the witnesses were making things up. It's getting hard to separate fact from fiction, and that's too bad, because this is a very interesting case in the annals of ufology.
Another interesting case from the annals of ufology, again, is kind of outside your 25-year study and report, but it's probably, if there is a Canadian Roswell in the McCulloch case, isn't it? Shag Harbor would be really quite high up on my list of really good, well-documented Canadian cases. Now, the involvement, we've covered the case on previous episodes with you, but But the involvement of the military in Shag Harbor is particularly intriguing. And do we see any other parallel cases where the military gets involved to the extent that they did in this case? And have we seen any other cases where it appears the Canadian and American defense apparatus are working together in some fashion?
Well, I think there is, and one that comes to mind is Rivers, Manitoba, also from 1967, oddly enough, the same year of both Shag Harbor and the Mihalik case in Falcon Lake, and also in Manitoba. This was quite interesting because I found the documents for this case in the Canadian National Archives. Happened on August 28th. There were 6 witnesses. 3 of them were military personnel, all stationed at a military base there. Plus, there were civilians. In fact, 2 of the witnesses were a military individual and his girlfriend. And they were separated. These witnesses were separated by a significant distance. And it started when 2 additional witnesses started the case investigation by there was an explosion that rattled windows and there were vibrations and all this sort of stuff. There were balls of flame, and here's the flame thing again. That sounds reminiscent of Cash Landrum. It flared up. A number of people saw it moving around. What's curious is not necessarily the report itself and the fact that we have military observers and military witnesses. But one thing that's very weird is that in the reports that I was able to find, it actually said that an investigation team was quickly assembled and was dispatched to the site. Now, this investigation team was dispatched from Winnipeg to Rivers, which is about, 3-4 hours away, and dispatched immediately. And this is a case where we have evidence that there was an actual UFO investigation team. So in other words, a Blue Book team, and this case is actually part of Blue Book, that we have individuals in the military assembled, and is like Avengers assemble. Let's get right out there and investigate the case, which is, to me, quite interesting, because if the UFO phenomenon was not being taken seriously, why would there be a team that could be identified and assembled and dispatched immediately to a location where something had been experienced? Now, if this is what we know happens in Canada, it seems completely reasonable that a similar team of some sort was at work or ready to be dispatched in the United States. So to me, we have some evidence that military investigation and involvement in UFO cases was very, very significant.
If anybody says that they don't take these cases seriously, I think at least back then they did. Perhaps today it might be different, but I really have a sense that they did. Another thing that comes to mind for me personally, as someone that's really dove into the unexplained livestock death phenomenon, is the number of cases that occurred in Canada of cattle mutilations during the early to mid 80s, when the RCMP was very active in investigating claims by ranchers, mostly in Saskatchewan, Alberta, some in BC, some further over in Manitoba. But it seems like the authorities there in Canada took these cases very seriously. Now, do you have any cases that mention UFO sightings in conjunction with mutilation reports?
I would say not in conjunction in the cases that I've seen personally. I mean, I looked at 3 mutes myself up here in Manitoba. There was an interest, and what's curious is that they were occurring in the same locations where there were UFOs being seen. So there wasn't a direct connection in terms of, witnesses seeing a UFO and then a mute being found the next day in their yard or something like that. But they were occurring in the same general area. And Tommy Roy Bland, who was one of the early investigators of mutes, actually prepared a report for the RCMP in Calgary on his belief that we were looking at some sort of satanic rituals and so forth. And he was received by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police with almost open arms. I mean, they accepted his report, they discussed it, they thanked him for the report. It wasn't dismissed at all. So it was a very good relationship that was, being fostered at that time regarding officials and the mute situation. And because in that report too, I think Tommy actually included a lot of UFO cases that were occurring, and there were some occurring at that time in Alberta as well, that there was this relationship that was, if not obvious, but certainly something that was notable.
Ah. I just had just something to ask about those cases where injuries were reported, the ones that we've considered the more famous cases. Any possibility some or all of them were due to experimental aircraft rather than some kind of unknown?
I think there's no question that they might have been. In the Mihalik case, that's always was something that was considered. In fact, there's an entire chapter in Palmiro Campagna's book on Canadian UFOs, where he lays out the case that it was in fact sort of an extension of the Avro saucer that was being developed, that continued to be developed, and that there was a test vehicle of some sort. The problem that I have with that is, if what was what ended up burning Mr. Mihalik was a test vehicle of some sort, one would expect more documentation, more sightings. Like, here we have something that was capable of vertical takeoff and landing in a disc shaped, and yet after 1967. There weren't a lot of cases that exactly matched this description. So I don't think that we would have seen a single prototype like this. We would have seen some stages, maybe, oval or square, and then larger and smaller. And it didn't manifest until much later that we began to see some, drones and things like that.
Let me ask you more about that in the next segment. Chris Rutkowski is joining us this week. You're in
the Paracast.
UnseenNow.com, proud sponsor of GCN. Unseen Now's unparalleled encryption tools keep your communications secure. GCN. Genesis is defined as an origin, creation, or the beginning. Genesis Communications Network began with the mission of providing you with the kind of compelling content you're listening to now. And at GCNlive.com, you'll find a free archive of our nation's history, narrated by GCN hosts, explored, shared, and passed down to future generations. GCN is the future of talk radio, but we should always strive to learn from our past. Together, we are GCNlive.com. GCN.
We the people grow cotton, weave fabric, engrave ink, embed strips and fibers to protect from counterfeit, then carting to a private bank, having it led back at interest, forcing taxes to service debt. This capitalism, or was Jefferson correct when stating a central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army? Hi, Ted Anderson. I'm placing a free silver dollar in a book that explains our monetary system. Call for your copy, 800-686-2237. It's time to understand the system. Call 800-686-2237. That's 800-686-2237.
Whoa! This is big!
By popular demand, the Freeze Dry Guy's giant factory authorized sale has been extended. Now through August, save 30 to 45% on number 10 cans of high-quality Mountain House freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy. Now's the time to stock up on all factory fresh stock of the finest, best-tasting, longest-proven shelf-life foods in the industry at giant savings of 30 to 45%. But hurry, supplies are limited, so this sale is only through the end of August. Call 866-404-3663. Free shipping to the lower 48 states. Click freezedryguide.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguide.com. Hurry! The giant factory authorized Mountain House sale with savings of 30 to 45% is extended through August from the Freeze Dry Guy, the finest freeze-dried and dehydrated foods available anywhere for long-term storage.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
I keep coming back to this issue with regard to possible test aircraft. And I realize these seem to be one-off cases, the one you're referring to, Chris Rutkowski, Cash Landrum, of course, Rendlesham. And the only thing I would say, which means nothing, is that maybe one reason you don't see repetitions is because by causing injuries to people, personal injury, which can cause serious problems because obviously the authorities can get sued, if nothing else. And the politicians can get bad publicity, if nothing else, and not get reelected, that they elected not to repeat these experiments because of the fact that nasty things happened. And that might be it, that maybe there were other experiments that didn't intrude on the public space, but the ones that did cause problems. So let's stop that and try something different. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems, though, that these cases are accidental. It's not that like the witnesses are inadvertently targeted as being convenient to the actual proximity of the craft. It seems to me, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, many of these cases seem to be a witness stumbling on some sort of mechanized device that's possibly emitting radiation. And even sometimes the device seems to be in trouble. It's not, Gene, I don't think it's like these people are being targeted.
I'm not saying they're being targeted. I'm just saying they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the point being here is that it happened, that people suffered injuries, causes a lot of complications. And look how they hide things. Look how the government kind of didn't tell us about the mess of the VA here in the U.S. until the scandal got out of proportion.
Right.
Isn't that typical for governments? You really want to hide the bad news. So if people are getting injured, maybe there are other cases that we don't know about where they got to the people in time before there was publicity and said, hey, we'll take care of your medical care. Or in this case, things got out of hand before they got to that. In fact, in the case of John Burroughs, they don't want to take care of his medical care. That's his big problem.
Right. Although we did find out about the VA situation. That's the other point. We don't have good documentation and a public admission of the UFO situation that they actually do have these vehicles or something like that. And that goes back to something Stan Friedman would say about how that they can keep secrets. The Manhattan Project was kept secret for a long, long, long time. And there continue to be black projects that Congress has, no access to whatsoever. So there's a lot of secrets that are out there. So would is this a case of where there was something so secret that it'll never become public, or is it a case that we're just waiting for the right opportunity?
Well, that raises the bigger question here, which is back to disclosure. Is it possible the government has, any government, Canadian, U.S., Russian, Chinese, India, UK, guilty knowledge of what UFOs really are if they're not test aircraft, if they're not conventional? Is that a possibility? And if so, is that it, that they'll always be able to keep the secret for as long as it serves their purposes?
Well, I think that secrets can be kept permanently. I mean, things do leak out from time to time, depending on how much you invoke the fear of God into some people. I mean, you only have to watch House of Cards to see how well contrived secrets in Washington can get. And in the case of Roswell, I mean, we're talking a long time ago now, and the story has become so confused by various witnesses, by the fact that I'm sure the documentation is gone or locked away so securely that we're not going to open a cigar box by accident when we're poking around in somebody's office and seeing all the Roswell revelations, like a story that came out a few years ago suggested. I would be very surprised if something as secret as that could be admitted. And yet, in terms of alien visitors, Phil Plait would be shocked to find out that he agrees with me on this, but I think it's very likely that aliens coming to visit Earth would be detectable by astronomers, if they're coming in fleets or motherships and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's the premise of District 9 and movies like that.
Well, the NRO is keeping an eye on things coming in.
Absolutely. And amateur astronomers are probably the best ones because they're the ones who are actually spending time at their telescopes every night looking up, and they have the all-sky cameras in their backyards and things like that. And so, we have a good eye on the sky in that regard. But at the same time, that assumes that there's a technology or there isn't a technology out there that, can hide themselves from us. And I'm not convinced that we have all the technology figured out quite yet. But having said that, I suspect that we're never going to get to the bottom of the Roswell thing. And that may shock people because I'm theoretically on the dream team, and I haven't seen any data yet that has come my way that proves one thing or another.
Yeah, Gene and I aren't holding our breaths, Chris.
Excuse me.
Yeah. But I haven't seen anything coming my way that proves anything one way or another. But I'm willing to take an objective look at any evidence. So as far as Roswell goes, I don't know. I suspect we're never going to get to the bottom of it. As for
those files hit a burn bag at some point. It had to.
Yeah, but you know something here. If we did retrieve a spaceship and a few bodies, that itself is exposing what happened to more people. It's not just an academic report of what we saw in the sky. It's something where there's physical evidence that has been recovered. And the more people get involved, the more cooks preparing the stew, the more possibility that real stuff is going to leak, not just a bunch of contradictory stories remembered 30 years later.
Absolutely true. And the problem is, in the case of Roswell, we're looking at something that happened in 1947, and the original witnesses and the immediate families of the original witnesses have by and large passed away. So we are looking at third-hand accounts, that we are looking at documents. And yet, if we did have Dulce or one of those bases where there's underground aliens in pickle jars and reverse engineered whatever.
Nightmare Hall.
Yeah.
I like the pickle jar equation.
Like the pickle jar.
Yeah.
I would think, true, that there would be somebody who would be blowing the whistle, and it wouldn't be Edward Snowden. It would be somebody else with a little closer access to it. And yet we're not seeing that. Now, does that mean that after
we have Anthony Sanchez as Colonel X?
Colonel X, that's right. Yeah, we do.
Actually, that's Tim Beckley's Colonel B, or is it Tim Beckley's Commander X?
Yeah,
I lost track.
Yeah, I mean, there are people coming forward. I saw the deathbed confession that was produced, I think, last year or the year before. Some of those are intriguing, but they can't be verified. And, I think it's a problem. What do you do with cases like that? And
they're apocryphal, I think would be the term.
Apocryphal, indeed, yes.
One thing that, we're kind of skirting around the subject again of disclosure. One thing that I think that Canadian researchers and investigators, such as yourself, have in their favor is more of a sense of openness from the government, from the military, from local and regional officials. There isn't quite the stigma, it appears, in Canada, in the media and in, military circles and that sort of thing. People are, I think, a little bit more circumspect, and they seem to be more open-minded in official capacities up there. Would you agree?
I'd have to agree. I mean, there was actually a legislative assembly statement investigation that was presented in the government of the Northwest Territories, or was it the Yukon? I think it was Yukon after all. A number of years ago when Martin Jasek presented his findings on the Yukon case, and it actually was entered into official government records. We don't find that going on in a lot of countries, although, a lot of countries today, I mean, I saw the Chile notes just the other day, and, we have England and the release of the MOD report. There's a lot of countries around the world who are releasing information and do have official investigations. In France, the center out there is doing a very interesting job of collecting cases in both official capacity and from citizens. There are some interesting documents that are being made available, and I think there is a general openness. As far as Canada goes, I mean, remember that, we wouldn't necessarily have the MJ-12 discussions that we would be having now if it wasn't for the fact that Wilbert Smith, a Canadian, reported to his superiors in Ottawa after a trip down to Washington on what his investigations and queries about flying saucers were. Back in the 50s, he found that there was some serious discussion going on in Washington. And while that document in which he reported to his superiors about the seriousness of UFOs in the United States was not made public in the United States for quite some time, it was made public in Canada much, much earlier. So there always has been a very interesting connection between the two countries. And it's true, Canada has been generally open. I mean, even to this day, I get reports through official channels regarding some UFOs. So, that may change.
Chris Rutkowski is with us. You're in
the Paracast.
Neighbors, are you tired of dealing with a slow web hosting provider? Well, check out A2 Hosting and their screaming fast Swift server platform. They even have SSDs that load pages 300% faster than the competition. Ready to give your site a speed boost? Well, tell you what, neighbors, head on over to a2hosting.com. That's A2, that's number 2, a2hosting.com. Check out their Prime hosting account. And get this, neighbors, they're even giving you an exclusive 25% off discount for all our listeners. 25%. And remember, their Guru Crew support team is standing by 24/7, 365 days a year to answer any of your questions. Now, to get the discount, use the coupon code GENE when you check out.
Gold. It's like nothing else on Earth. From the Romans through the Renaissance, from the Industrial Age to the Space Age, gold has weathered the test of time. For 6,000 years, gold has remained the ultimate store of wealth. According to the World Gold Council and the U.S. Mint, demand is at an all-time high. The stage is being set for the reemergence of gold as the common-sense alternative to a fiat paper currency that gets weaker every day. Midas Resources is proud to offer the hard-hitting report that arms you with the truth you need to protect you and your family from the Fed's plans for your hard-earned money. Don't gamble with your future. Call Midas Resources today and ask for your free copy of As Good as Gold. Call 1-800-686-2237 for the report the Fed hopes you'll never see. As Good as Gold can be yours by calling 800-686-2237. If you have ever thought about owning gold, you must read this report. Call Midas today at 800-686-2237.
Don't complain about your cable bill going up and up and up. Do something about it. Grab a pencil and jot down this special number, 1-855-905-MY-TV. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Say goodbye to the cable guy and get more of your favorite channels in 100% digital quality for less money. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99, and there's no equipment to buy. You get free HD TV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. You control what you watch when you watch it. Record your favorite shows, pause and rewind live TV, even skip the commercials. Watch local channels too. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Pull out your major credit or debit card. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut costs and get more. 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV.
Whoa! This is big! By popular demand, the Freeze Dry Guy's giant factory authorized sale has been extended. Now through August, save 30 to 45% on number 10 cans of high-quality Mountain House freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy. Now's the time to stock up on all factory fresh stock of the finest, best-tasting, longest-proven shelf-life foods in the industry at giant savings of 30 to 45%. But hurry, supplies are limited, so this sale is only through the end of August. Call 866-404-3663. Free shipping to the lower 48 states. Click freezedryguide.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguide.com. Hurry! The giant factory authorized Mountain House sale with savings of 30 to 45% is extended through August from the Freeze Dry Guy, the finest freeze-dried and dehydrated foods available anywhere for long-term storage.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
Of course, when we talk about Canadian UFO research, we have one other gentleman whose name enters to the picture, Chris O'Brien. Tell Chris Rutkowski who that is.
Well, I'm sure, Chris, a couple of years back, you were interested in the so-called Stephen Bassett's so-called disclosure hearings. And the very last person to get up and address the panel was a former Minister of Defense from Canada, Paul Hellyer. And what stunned me was that he read verbatim a transcript allegedly put together by Jim Sparks, a questionable abductee, and Hellyer read what the ETs allegedly had told Sparks about environmental degradation and atomic weapons and all these kind of cliche phrases that crop up from time to time in the abduction and contactee literature. What is your take on Hellier, and how could someone in former capacity like that come across so naive? If I hadn't been working there, I would have started raising my voice in the audience with some indignation based on what he was saying. Where do you come down on the Hellier involvement in all this?
Yeah, I remember talking with Don Schmidt about this, and he said as soon as Hellier started speaking, he closed his notebook because he figured that that's the end of the conference. There's no point even talking about it. Yeah, it's interesting that the comments that Hellier was phrasing there from Sparks is basically the contactee message of the 1950s. Notice how we've come full circle again in so many ways. I have actually talked with Paul Hellier on a couple of occasions. He and I were guests on a program up here in Canada. I found him very nice, very pleasant gentleman. I simply have no idea how he could possibly say the things he's doing. I mean, the comments that he was making about the aliens in the Las Vegas bases, they go into Las Vegas in disguise so they can go to the casinos and shop and things like that. I mean, it's so ridiculous. One could just imagine that we're talking about a science fiction program more than anything else. And yet this person has very good credentials. In fact, his UFO connection goes back quite far back into the 1960s. He actually gave the statement from the Canadian government when the UFO landing pad in St. Paul, Alberta was dedicated. He actually opened that, which was quite interesting because at that time, which was also 67, people weren't really talking in those terms. When Hellier often comments about how he hadn't seen any UFO good information crossing his desk as Minister of Defense. I find that very hard to believe because I've gone looking through the archives for documents, and there's many documents regarding UFOs that are to his attention, that look to be that it was brought to his attention on some classic cases. Certainly cases like the Falcon Lake incident, Charleswood, and a few others took place during his tenure. So I find it hard to believe how he wouldn't have any knowledge of what was really going on until he was on a vacation and somebody gave him a book, on UFOs that really had some doubts. And he says now that he has confirmation of this information about the contactee and abductee situation through a military friend of his that he can't disclose the identity of. I just find the entire story very, very unbelievable. In fact, the damage that his comments make to ufology is inestimable because it's very, very unusual. And yet he's very pleasant. He's a nice man. Some have suggested that perhaps he's a disinformer. He's making the whole UFO thing look bad.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, what you thought.
It's certainly possible, but I really don't know. He's making some extraordinary claims that most serious ufologists wouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole. So I really don't know. I know that there had been some UFO policies that were formulated in the 1960s that he must have been aware of as Minister of Defense. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there.
Now, I don't want to be insulting about it, but maybe he's seen better years, and as he gets older, he becomes more gullible, or maybe he just wants to seem relevant by coming out with more extreme statements?
It's possible. Some people have suggested perhaps dementia is setting in, and all I can say is that when I was sitting next to him on a TV program, he was as sharp as a tack. I don't know what to say beyond that.
Well, I guess you can't assume a person who is a little bit older is necessarily losing it. I mean, we had Stanton Friedman on a few weeks ago, just turned 80, just had a mild heart attack, and he was as sharp as he ever was. We had Don Berliner somewhat later. He's 84. And you can't tell it when you listen to the show. This guy is just raring to go. And he's very careful, very pointed in his comments. I don't know. So I do not know the man. I do not presume to guess why he is making statements that are or seem less than credible. But there you go. There you go. What can I say? Wilbert Smith. Now, he evidently was quite close to Major Donald Kehoe in the early days because he was mentioned in his books. What's your assessment of the information he brought forth, especially his contacts with the U.S. and his efforts to make the UFO subject credible in Canada?
Well, certainly Wilbert Smith, is responsible for a lot of the interesting material that we have from the 1950s. Grant Cameron has done a great job of tracking down Smith. He actually spent some time with Smith's wife and some of his other family. There's some interesting documents that are available. He was worked in electrical engineering. He actually managed to create a flying saucer, detection station at Shirley's Bay in Ontario. And one of the interesting cases in the records of Canadian ufology is that at one point his detection equipment went off, indicating that something was going to be flying overhead. And he recorded this, and nothing was actually seen, but there's something very large set off all these magnetic and electromagnetic detectors that he had set up. He also got into some pretty strange stuff. I mean, he created binding meters and things like that for detecting objects in the sky. None of his work with regard to UFOs was endorsed by the Canadian government. This is something that was always purported to be in his own time because of his interest. They let him do his own thing because he was quite a genius in electrical engineering. In fact, some of his patents still stand today for some of the electrical equipment that's in use around the world. And yet he, claimed contact with aliens, more contactee more than abductee. An interesting story, and yet mixed in with all this, he was involved in the Canadian UFO projects that were on official basis, Project Magnet and Second Story. Seemed to have been crowded out of some of the second story cases by some of the upper management. And yet he was instrumental in trying to make some sense. In fact, I think he sincerely tried to understand the UFO phenomenon in terms of physical craft, trying to understand magnetic lines of force. Perhaps the craft are flying, through the atmosphere following magnetic lines of force. Did some interesting work on magnetic mapping.
Let's go into that in our next segment with Chris Rutkowski. With Gene and KK, you're in
the Paracast.
GCN, proudly sponsored by UnseenNow.com. Find out how to stop Big Brother in his tracks at UnseenNow.com. This is GCN.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's LEMKEsoft.com. lemkesoft.com. LEMKEsoft.com.
The Genesis Communications Network is one of America's premier broadcasters of captivating talk radio. We thank you for listening. Now, just imagine, there are thousands of people who are just as passionate about radio as you are. But what you may not realize is how easy and affordable it is to advertise with us. Radio commercials for your business could be heard on hundreds of radio stations across the U.S. every day. We can help you by creating an effective radio advertising campaign for your company. From script writing to producing your commercial, just like the one you're listening to right now. No other network provides the level of customer service we do. When it comes to radio advertising, we are your one-stop shop. And no matter how big or small your business is, we can help. Email us at advertise@gcnlive.com, and an experienced advertising executive will help you take the first step towards driving more customers to your business or website. Advertise@gcnlive.com. Easy, affordable, effective.
For over 5 years, you've been hearing about the Berkey guy, so you may know a few things about him. For example, you are well aware of the superior quality and effectiveness of Berkey water filters and accessories. But did you know the Berkeys have had independent lab tests done to prove just how effective they are? It's true, and he can email you the test results. Just visit goberkey.com. You may also know that the Berkey guy has helped tens of thousands of people get better prepared. Now here's something you may not know. GoBerkey.com has amazing specials and deals all the time on a wide variety of survival and preparedness products. Most ready to ship same day. Visit the Berkey guy at goberkey.com and be sure to click the red Products on Sale Now button. You can always call toll-free 877-886-3653. Again, that's 877-886-3653. goberkey.com, home of the Berkey guy.
Hi, this is Larry Smith. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Like when the jeweler ruined my ring and wouldn't do anything about it. But when my Legal Shield attorney called him and told him what my rights were, I received a check for over $2,100. Worry less and live more with lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com or call 855-340-SAVE. Again, 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
Next to water and food, you need a safe, storable fuel supply for your preparedness needs. Spare fuel is the answer. Spare fuel can be used in any gas-powered vehicle or generator. Spare fuel is perfect for any unforeseen out-of-gas emergencies. Unlike gasoline, spare fuel is safe to store with your other supplies, and it can be stored for many years. Go to GetSpareFuel.com for special pricing. That's GetSpareFuel.com.
Hi, my name is Richard Dolan. You're listening to the Paracast.
Again, if you want to get a copy of Chris O'Brien's Secrets of the Mysterious Valley, where he sums up lots of years of research, we have a free copy of the ebook just for you. All you have to do is sign up for our weekly newsletter, the Paracast newsletter. Go to theparacast.com, sign up, and we'll email you a link to download that newsletter. Chris Rutkowski is joining us, and we're focusing on UFO research, particularly in Canada, talking about the late Wilbert Smith and some of his activities. Let me just move away because we have only 2 segments left, trying to look at different implications of UFO research. And I'll start with this before I ask you more about your 25 years, the 15,000 sightings that you collected. And that is, do you think there's an answer that will come in our lifetimes, or at least my son's lifetime?
To the UFO question completely, that's a good question. It depends on the direction that you think that the UFO phenomenon is taking. If you're thinking that the UFO phenomenon represents an alien intervention of some sort, I suspect we're going to be getting some more information over the next little while, because we're probably only a few years away now for astronomers to announce the discovery of a truly Earth-like planet within close proximity. We're very close to that. There have been many exoplanets which have been discovered. Some are, too hot, too cold, too close to the star, and so forth. Probably very close to one that's very much like ourselves. And there's been a lot of speculation of what that means. If we do find one that's very much like Earth, very close to us, do we make some attempts to contact them? And why wouldn't, something that's there contact us? In terms of trying to understand the UFO phenomenon in terms of what has been covered up, or the documentation, or is there enough investigation going on, I have no doubt that various governments in the world have more information than they're letting on. I mean, there must be more documentation of cases. There's a big gap in the United States. What happened after Blue Book, for example, since 1970? What happened to all the cases that are being reported then? Is there an investigation going on? Even during Blue Book, there's a lot of evidence that there were good cases that were being funneled elsewhere so that they weren't part of the Blue Book study. Where are all those reports? Is there a high-level investigation going on? I suspect that simply by the nature of the beast that there would be some high-level investigations in a number of various governments. Whether that means that the UFOs are real in the sense of spaceships from another planet, or test projects for military applications, or a natural phenomenon that may be used in the case of Wilbur Smith, where he was looking into possible military applications, having military vehicles traveling on magnetic lines of force, that type of thing. I don't know, but I suspect that there is more to be found, and it's simply through decent investigation, diligence on the part of UFO investigators, and perhaps allegiances and perhaps alliances with debunkers and skeptics. I mean, I think that, for example, in the case of Ted Mulzen's study of satellite reentries, there's no question that if UFO investigators were working much closer with people involved in the study of satellites and their orbits and reentries, that a lot of classic UFO cases might be solved or might have more information. And in military applications, maybe people with connections to the military might assist UFO investigators in coming clean and trying to understand what's going on with regard to some classic cases of the past, maybe even some coming up in the past few years. So I think we're on the dawn of some changes to ufology, probably both good and bad. I think that there's a desperate need for good investigation. I think that such a small fraction, maybe only 5% of all UFO cases are being adequately investigated. Hopefully people will be looking at or listening to podcasts like this, wanting to get more involved, wanting to learn more about the phenomenon, not dismissing it out of hand and not embracing everything they read about completely either, but trying to understand what's going on and liaising with the scientific community. There's a good invisible college out there that Vallée used to describe of scientists who are open to the possibility of that there's real value in studying the UFO phenomenon. I think that as we progress into the future, that some of the grad students of today will be taking a closer look at what's going on in the future.
There's a general perception, and I guess this is based on the attendance profile of recent UFO conventions, that most of the people who look into these things are over 50. It's not like, we had 2,000 to 4,000 people at this Contact in the Desert event, 400 people at the recent MUFON convention, but 130,000 at Comic-Con San Diego. So is this a subject just for older people, or do young people simply consume their media differently?
I think that there's a need to listen to the wisdom of the elders, certainly. And the UFO phenomenon does go back a ways. In fact, people starting into looking at the phenomenon recently and pretending that the past 50 years of ufology doesn't exist, they're going to reinvent the wheel, are really not appreciating what's been going on. I'm always encountering people who come up with theories that have been thought about 30 years ago. At the same time, your point about Comic-Con is very good. In fact, one of the best attended talks I ever gave was at the Worldcon when it was up here in Canada in about 1986 or so.
Worldcon, by the way, is a science fiction convention, folks.
Yeah, supposedly the largest, although Comic-Con these days is much, much larger. But yeah, and I gave a presentation on UFOs, and it was very well received. There were a lot of skeptics in the audience, but by and large, the science fiction community was interested in hearing about the UFO phenomenon from a straight point of view. I mean, they weren't necessarily interested in the abductions and contactee stuff because they read that all the time in the comic books and in science fiction literature. They wanted to know what was real. And the fact that there are real science panels at science fiction conventions and at Comic-Con now too suggests that there is a need for good science and good understanding of the world in which we live and the understanding the universe. And I think there's a way to bridge between the old guard and the people coming on board.
Now, traditionally, though, I've found that people in the science fiction field tend to be negative about UFOs. And maybe that changed with regard to your session at Worldcon. But that's been my experience over the years, and maybe that's a helpful change.
Yeah, and it's true that by and large, science fiction people aren't really into UFOs. It's looked upon as its own genre, and it is interesting that many UFO conventions resemble science fiction conventions in a lot of way in their structure and the way that discussions go and so forth, even to the point of the huckster tables being some of the same tables at UFO conventions and science fiction conventions. I think that it is changing. I think that young people into the science fiction and actually manga and anime now more than anything else. If you look at the people attending manga and anime conventions, they really are unversed in ufology, and maybe they need an introduction. And I think that there probably should be a better effort to reach out to these groups of individuals and just get a dialogue going, not to thrust anything on them, but let's talk about what's really going on, because there's some interesting cases out there in ufology that if they're not science fiction, maybe they are real.
Well, it would be nice to see a change in the world of science fiction. I'll tell you what, there's another question in the till here from Randall, our friend Ufology, on the forums, your fellow Canadian, and he's asking about the top 5 cases that you investigated out of those 15,000 that you collected. Of course, you mentioned before that it was maybe the 1% that were unknown. And of course, we all joke about the 1%, but in this case, if we had one good UFO sighting, it would be sufficient to prove that something weird is going on. So in our next segment, the question on the table, what are the best 5 cases, or any cases that our listeners will find interesting, compelling in the ones that you worked on? Chris Rutkowski and his crew looked into 15,000 cases, 25 years of UFO research in Canada. One more segment to come with Gene and Chris O'Brien. You're in
the Paracast.
Free from the shackles of corporate America, we're the place for independent thinkers. GCN.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
It's the heart of summer across America. Thoughts turn to childhood and long days of fun. Everybody would love to feel like a kid again. And HB Extract can be a vital tool in your battle to stay vibrant and young, as it supports healthy blood pressure and circulation while balancing cholesterol. GCN and longtime sponsor HB Extract want to help keep your heart healthy with the 30-bottle, 30-day summer giveaway. Enter to win by visiting GCNlive.com between now and August 29 and click on the contest banner in the top left corner of the page. HB Extract has helped tens of thousands of people worldwide feel good again, and they've done it with HB Extract's exclusive formula of wild, crafted, and organic herbs. Here's to you enjoying many more long, warm, and fun-filled summers, free of pain and sickness. Visit GCNlive.com and enter to win in the 30-bottle, 30-day summer giveaway with HB Extract. A healthy heart is a happy heart. Sign up now at GCNlive.com.
Hi, this is Steve Sanchez, and based on a recent study, it was found that 57 million Americans had legal issues over the last 12 months, but only 60% of those studied sought out the services of a lawyer. Why? In a nutshell, affordability. Well, my friends at Legal Shield have created a solution that can help you not if, but when you need an attorney. For as little as $17 per month, Legal Shield will provide you unlimited access to qualified attorneys at an accomplished law firm for advice and counsel on legal issues, no matter how serious or trivial. Shield. For over 40 years and with 1.4 million families across North America, Legal Shield can help you, the loyal GCN listener. Representatives are standing by now to answer your questions, so call them now at 1-855-340-SAVE. That's 1-855-340-7283, or visit them at lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com.
Results will vary from case to case.
A little over a year ago, I began to do a lot of research into why, even if I had a pretty good-sized meal, that I was still starving. And my research led me to a well-known fact that most of the soils that we grow our crops on here in the United States and across the industrialized world are almost completely depleted of almost all of the key minerals and trace elements that our bodies need to rebuild themselves, fight off cancer, and be healthy. I then searched out the best vitamin and mineral company out there and discovered Youngevity. The Youngevity products are designed to give you the real nutrition you need, and once you've got that, you don't have to eat as much to be satisfied. I've lost 37 pounds in 2 months, simply getting the vitamins and minerals I need. Check it out for yourself. It's incredible. Go to InfoWarsTeam.com today and order your first canister of Beyond Tangy Tangerine Complete Multivitamin Mineral Complex Dietary Supplement. That's InfoWarsTeam.com.
Hello, this is Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Question on the table. Top 5 UFO cases among the 15,000. You want to give us brief summaries of some of these cases, Chris Rutkowski?
Yeah, that's a tough one to pick out just 5. There's no question that we've touched on some of the top 5 of all time. The Falcon Lake case, Shag Harbor, Langenberg. We haven't mentioned, but people will probably be familiar with those. Those go back quite a few years. The past 25 years, I sat down with Jeff Dittman and Ashley Kircher. We went through all the ones that were considered high quality. We said, okay, which ones are the best of the best? And we came up with an interesting list. One that really stands out for me is Etzicom, Alberta. And Etzicom is barely a dot on the map in southern Alberta, quite close to the American border. In April of 2001, a number of people had seen funnel-shaped flames descending from the sky and then rising into the sky again. And shortly after that, a crater was found in the field. This was, it looked like a moon crater. It was about 20, 30 feet wide or something like that. And somebody said, well, maybe it was a meteorite crater. Something fell from the sky, and that's what it looked like, because it looked a lot like that. This was actually investigated by astronomers who concluded that it was not a meteor crater. The question is then, what was it? And we actually have, a detailed analysis of this crater, detailed studies available. The witnesses testify they did see something appear to fall from the sky over this field, and the crater was physically there. One of the most puzzling cases that we ever recorded during this entire time.
1 case down, 4 to go.
Okay. I would then have to go to Pickle Lake, Ontario. February 1994, a pilot was flying over northwestern Ontario and saw a saucer-shaped object with a classic curved top and brown and orange in color with dark spots along his rim. It actually flew below his plane and then rose up to his altitude, closed to within about 300 yards, and then dove to the ground. Scared the heck out of him. And the pilot said that he was, very, very puzzled about what possibly could have occurred. Another one from the top 5, I mentioned this one already, the nurse who returned home from working at a hospital. This is November of 1992. The abduction case, not a classic abduction because these were not the classic grays. There was something a little bit different, but a lot of the elements are there, included missing time. I'm including it because very few abduction cases were physically reported to us. There are actually some that were reported to the Canadian forces. There were some that were reported to us. This was reported very early on in the Canadian UFO survey, 1992. And we had the opportunity to speak with the nurse, talk with her at length. She drew the imagery from it. It was a very, very curious case, and we included it in our list of the top of the past 25 years. If I was to go into another one, London, Ontario, December of 1991, a pilot of a commercial airliner flying along 33,000 feet when all of a sudden the airborne avoidance collision radar detected three objects directly ahead of his plane. The objects moved to beside him at a range of about 6 miles and paced him, and then they flew away. And it's reported that the Toronto Air Traffic Control reported the objects on radar as well. So there's a radar case that was reported over the past 25 years. And finally, I have to include it, Montreal, Quebec, 1990. In November, a woman was swimming on a pool that was on the 17th floor of a very large hotel in downtown Montreal. She saw an object stationary in the sky, projecting a series of light beams in the sky. Police were called, and eventually dozens of people saw this object, and photographs were taken, which persisted for 3 hours, stationary in the sky, and then vanished. A number of explanations have been produced, whether this was some sort of specialized northern lights to reflections from nearby buildings and so forth. Hasn't adequately been explained. But we, it could have been a reflection from some skylights and things like that. Yet, it's a puzzle seen by very many people, investigated by the police.
Now, when you referred to the radar case before, this was a simultaneous radar visual sighting?
No, nothing visual was ever seen. This was simply by the pilot's radar and also detected by the ground radar.
All right.
Yeah. So it was simultaneous.
It was simultaneous, but not visual.
Now, the reason I mention this is because one of the comments that Bob Schaefer made on last week's episode, he was disputing the early radar visual cases, one saying they were in different locations, and if that didn't work, well, maybe our radar wasn't as good then, so there were basically false positives.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's a series of really interesting cases during the really early days of ufology in the 40s. I think it was 1948 when the American radar installation in Labrador, had a number of UFOs detected on radar and on different sets, as a matter of fact. And this is well documented. There's many case files regarding this, where the same radar that was used to vector in some of the aircraft that were known to be flying detected other things too that weren't flying at all at the time. You can't have it both ways. You can't either say that the radar isn't functioning at all, or malfunctioning, or the fact that it is actually very good and usable in military operations. Right. Certainly, we've come a long way since the 1940s. We don't admittedly get a lot of radar cases anymore. Certainly not the same number that we would be getting back then. Radar is a bit iffy, although, again, these are the same pieces of equipment that are used every day. And if something is detected on radar that shouldn't be there, I think it's worth a close look.
And besides, we don't have an avalanche of aircraft crashes. So obviously the radar is doing something right.
There's no question that something's going right.
Although I don't know about this theory about Roswell that the radar brought down ET. You have to think, is ET that primitive?
Yeah, would they really fly all the way here from a distant planet and get into a thunderstorm and crash?
Right. Well, it was a super duper secret high powered radar unit.
Yes, yeah.
Chris, give us a short list of some of the up and coming younger generation of investigators that you feel their work should be supported and acknowledged.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Got to be short, though, like a minute or a minute and a half.
Okay, I have to point to certainly Kurt Collins is quite good in his work, and Claudette Hubert. She's a Canadian. I have to give a plug to the Canadians because I think they should. She's been doing some very excellent work recently in Alberta, and she's been investigating. Sue St. Clair in Toronto is doing some very good work with her partner Matthew Didier, and been in contact with, I'm trying to remember some of the individuals down in the States. Micah Hanks, I think, is a very interesting person, very, very knowledgeable, and he's been doing some very interesting work and offering some discussions of his own.
Yep.
So there's a handful right there.
That's a good handful. Micah Hanks was on the show a couple of weeks ago. He's a friend of the show. Kurt Collins, of course, appears as Sentry in our forums, and he's a regular, very, very, very productive participant, and also helps us run the JimMosley.com site, a memorial site for the late Jim Mosley. Chris Rutkowski, please tell our listeners where they can find more of your stuff.
You can certainly go to my blog, which is uforum, uforum.blogspot.com. Links there to various books. I actually have 9 books published in the UFO field in general. Also the 25-year study. And if you want to look at the Canadian UFO surveys, there's links there. You can go directly to survey.canadianuforeport.com.
And by the way, if you sign up for our Paracast newsletter every week, you get a commentary from me and other people. Get your free copy at theparacast.com, theparacast.com. Sign up. We get you a copy of the ebook version of Secrets of the Mysterious Valley from Chris O'Brien at theparacast.com. Chris's own site is OurStrangePlanet.com, OurStrangePlanet.com. If you buy a copy of the hardcover edition, actually it's a paperback edition, you buy a copy of the physical edition of Stalking the Herd, Chris will sign and number it. On Facebook, there's an official Paracast fan club. On Twitter, we are known as the Paracast. Some other people have other names for us, but we can't repeat them on family radio. Chris Rutkowski, thank you for joining us on the Paracast.
Pleasure to be here.
The Paracast, featuring Gene Steinberg and Christopher O'Brien, is a copyrighted presentation of Making the Impossible, Incorporated. Tune in next week for a new adventure in The Paracast.